I'm going to break in just a minute here, and we're excited to see your next hour and 45 minutes of the workshop here at Blue Marble Week. And just remind everyone, this event is organized by the Foundation for the Future. The Foundation for the Future is a scientific education and public works advocacy foundation dedicated to the creation of that public-private space infrastructure partnership that will make space accessible to all. Our proposal to create the backbone of America's second century in space is that Space Act. To do this, we're developing an ecosystem of commerce for companies, innovators, and leaders who are building the future. We are currently seeking sponsors, donors, partners, and allies to contribute to our important work through both the Foundation for the Future and Blue Marble Week. To learn more, you can visit our website at f4f.space. That's the number 4. Michael, I'll hand it back to you to continue with the workshop.
Brad, thank you. Okay. We're going to spend the next part of this session. I think this is the meat of the Noumenia process. This is the stuff that's some of it is genuinely new, and some of it is borrowed from other places but applied in somewhat new ways. Again, I want to stress it's a process, and just jumping to this section means you're going to make some big mistakes. So you got to do the other pieces first. Okay. So stakeholders, challenges, and GET. GET stands for goals, investments, and tasks. These three together make what I call the action matrix. Imagine a spreadsheet, an enormous spreadsheet. Across the top, you're going to put all of your stakeholders. Down the side, you're going to put all of your challenges. And where those two columns and rows meet at the individual cell level, that's where you're going to write up your goals, investments, and tasks. Okay? This spreadsheet can be, I refer to it as a 3-dimensional to-do list, because you can set up a spreadsheet to have a different tab for a different day, right? So if you have a stakeholder, the United States government, the IRS, because it's on my top of mind. You guys can't see my other desk off the other screen here, but I'm doing paperwork right now. That's a stakeholder, right? And then challenges, the business of doing this business, that's a challenge. So where those two stakeholders and challenges meet, the columns and the rows meet at that cell, it's going to say pay your taxes, right? But because you can do this in tabs over time, you can have pay your taxes 2021, pay your taxes quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, pay your taxes 2022, quarter 1, quarter 2. So you can do this. It becomes a 3-dimensional to-do list, and 3-dimensional meaning time. So that's a kind of a vague way of describing it. I've struggled with this description several times. That's the best I can do so far. But that's what we're going to be focusing on. This action matrix has 3 main parts: stakeholders, challenges, and GETs. Okay, cool. As we do this, I want you to know that, again, it's hierarchical, right? It's super easy. Lee and I were just talking about, super easy to just jump into doing the work. But what I want to stress is, if you do it in this order, you're going to be doing the right work. Okay. I have spent a lifetime of making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. doing the right work is more important than just doing the work. And the action matrix helps you to understand what is the right work. I'm not flawless. God knows I've made some errors in my career. But trying to understand how these pieces fit together will give you a better chance of doing the right work. Okay. Stakeholders. We're going to spend the next like half an hour talking about stakeholders, which sounds like a lot of overkill. Bear with me, it's not. So first of all, I think it's interesting. Stakeholders are self-selecting. The actual definition, a person or group that has an investment, share, or interest in something. Probably should have an asterisk in here and cite its source, but I got that from a dictionary definition. Apparently I need to have a period at the end of this too. I've used this slides for years. I don't know, 3 years now. And apparently I've never figured out to put a period at the end of that sentence. So I'll fix that later.
It's a sentence fragment. You don't need a period.
Okay. Thanks. But like, let's take that apart a little bit, right? A person or group, and that's really important because individuals or stakeholders, kind of only individuals or stakeholders. A group can be a stakeholder, but it's headed by a person or has a team of people. So it still comes down to, individual relationships. And then has an investment, share, or interest in something. Well, so moments ago, Lee asked, do people want to help the foundation of the future? By the way, I think that they should. Full disclosure, I have. But how they relate to something puts them into a stakeholder category or not. But something that's not in this sentence is that they're self-identified, right? If you don't know about something, you cannot be a stakeholder in it. If you do know and don't care, you're not a stakeholder in it. So a stakeholder is different. I think people use that phrase, kind of too loosely. It's actually pretty specific. Examples for me, and LiftPort, my friends and family want to see me succeed. The Chamber of Commerce, I'm not even a member of my local chamber. They do not care. They do not know. They're not a stakeholder. I have a whole wall of magazine covers. I would say the media is not a stakeholder in a generic sense, but there are many reporters who have been watching and reporting on this. So individually, they would be stakeholders, but a group together, not a stakeholder. Same thing with governments, right? So far, the United States government is not a stakeholder in the lunar elevator or the Earth elevator. I hope that someday they become that, but they're not. And there's no such thing as a stakeholder government. The government doesn't necessarily care. Individuals who represent the government might care, right? So you see the nuance of that. I have clients. LiftPort has clients. Foundation for the Future is one of them. We don't really have competitors. Despite differences of opinion and friendly but professional disagreements about Earth elevator versus lunar elevator and why can't all elevators get along? Well, we do. We get along pretty well. Competitors, rockets to elevators, I think that's kind of ridiculous. I think Swan and his team really highlighted how ridiculous that was yesterday. Moon versus Mars competitors. I think that's also ridiculous. But people who care deeply about Mars sometimes don't care as much about the moon. That doesn't mean they're competitors, but it may make them cases for stakeholders, right? So there's nuance to this conversation that's important. Certainly my investors care. I'll talk more tomorrow about Kickstarter, but I have a fairly large community. My team and my project have a fairly large community. Some of them are very supportive. A few of them are on this call, so thanks. Shout out to y'all. And some of them are really actively angry, right? So that's part of it, but they care. Caring defines stakeholderness. I just made up that word, stakeholderness. And there's a lot of different ways to look at stakeholders. This is going to sound ridiculous, y'all, and I apologize, but I've spent a lot of time thinking about stakeholders because stakeholders have had an extraordinary impact on my team, myself, my project. And I've spent a lot of time, and I've come to the conclusion that you can make a lot of really good decisions, but if you make mistakes in stakeholders, it could be game over. Stakeholders are the fastest way to grow and the fastest way to fail. I'm going to say that again. I'm staking my reputation on this. Stakeholders are the fastest way to grow and the fastest way to fail. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about stakeholders. And I'm going to come back to this. There's ways of organizing this, right? Stance, position, organizational, jurisdictional, and individual stages. And we're going to go into this in detail, but I just wanted to look at this for a second. Stance, position, individual stages, jurisdiction, organization. This is how I break out stakeholders. It's also important to note that people can be in more than one box, right? They can be in more than one box here. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail here. It's not a typo, by the way. I did copy over the jurisdiction slide from the earlier one because it also fits here in the same way it also fit in the policies slide. So not a typo. All right. So stance. How do they feel about you? Remember, stakeholders are only stakeholders if they care. So it's a motive. How do they feel towards you? They can not care, like the little goldfish. I don't think, the goldfish that were bought were even aware that we existed. They wanted to get food. So they did qualify as a stakeholder, but only at the most basic level. Helpful and hinder, we're going to talk about them in a moment. Observer, there are tons of people watching. They're just watching. They care, but they've got other things to worry about, right? A friend of my family died last week. They have other things to worry about. They are not worrying about whether or not Blue Marble Week is a success or not. They have other things to think about. They should. We should not be their priority. We might still be a stakeholder in their eyes, but we don't rise to the level of significance right now. And then there's a lot of people that are in the wait and see category. They're not helpful or hurtful, but they are curious enough to be paying attention. And curiosity counts as a who cares, right? It is still an emotive response. So helpful and hinder. I mentioned a moment ago that the fastest way to succeed and the fastest way to fail is stakeholders. There are people that want us to succeed. And much to my, surprise and disappointment, there are people that want us to fail. I got a lot of angry messages yesterday because we sent them invitations to this event. I have trolls, I have griefers, and there are people that don't want this to succeed. And it surprises me and it makes me feel bad. They're successful in that. But they're out there, right? Fortunately, there are a lot of people that also want us to succeed. And fortunately, the numbers of people that are helpful outweigh the people that are hindering us. But identifying the stance is super important. How do people think about you? And what's also important is they can move from one bubble to a different bubble, right? What usually happens is undecideds move to helpful. That is usually what happens. Rarely does somebody go from undecided to hinder. Because if they didn't care enough to make a decision, they tend to not care enough to actively harm it. Observers, same story. Observers tend to move from observer to helpful. Ambivalent, they tend to not move. It's actually really hard to get ambivalence to move at all. But you can move from helpful to hinder and back and forth. I used to get a lot of people moving to helpful. I ran an extraordinarily stupid Kickstarter campaign, and I moved a lot of people from helpful to hinder very quickly. So, stance is really important. It has a lot of ripple effects. Okay, so that's one way of looking at stakeholders. Another is where are they? Where are they in relation to you? Are they inside your organization or outside your organization? I had a conversation with one of my team, the newest member of my team, early this morning, and I put a lot of responsibility on her recently. And it made me realize, and I've known this for a long time, but in her specific case, that she has the power to do an extraordinary amount of damage to our company and to our plan if I've picked the wrong person. Now, please believe me, I think I picked the right person. But I did pick the wrong person once, and I fired a kid who was an intern who was 15 years and 9 months. He wasn't quite 16, and that matters because he was an IT kid, and he had access to our servers, and more importantly, he had access to our passwords of our servers. He got himself fired for good reason. And then he spent the weekend passing our passwords out to all of his script kiddie friends, and then they got into our system. Now, this was not LiftPort. This was my internet company a long time ago. But it was a very hard way to learn the lesson that no one can do more damage to you, to your organization, than an internal stakeholder that's angry. By the way, it mattered that he was 15 3/4 because he got in no trouble, even despite doing $10,000, $20,000 worth of damage to our equipment and our databases, because he was not 16. And even though the FBI got called, all he got was chewed out over it. So Stakeholders and their position are really important. It's also one of the reasons why I stress that I'm near but not in the Foundation for the Future, right? I have a contractor role, so I am external to this. I strongly hope that they succeed because I fundamentally believe in their vision, mission, and values. But I'm not a part of their organization, and so roles and understanding stakeholder roles is super important. And then here's another way that people can move. And again, you can move from internal to external and back and forth, right? So again, these are movable positions. This one is also about moving, right? First of all, most people don't care. It doesn't matter what you're doing, how cool it is. Some people in my family are really into sports, specifically the New England Patriots. And I'm absolutely oblivious. I had to be told several times who was even in the Super Bowl last year, because I don't care. I don't care. I still don't care. I didn't care then. I won't care next year either. Most people do not care about whatever you are passionately caring about, right? Like, let that sink in for a second. Be humble for a moment. Most people do not care about the thing that you care the most about, right? Because there's 7.8 billion people in the world, and most people are not aware of you. And then of those that are aware, there's a lot of people that have other things to think about. But of the people that do care, I just mentioned I've got, there's about, I would say there's about 3 dozen, probably 30-ish people that moved from skeptic to active anger when I screwed up my Kickstarter campaign. And I still deal with them, right? It's only, quote unquote, only 30 people out of thousands that support this thing, but I still have to deal with them, right? And they care a lot. I found out yesterday because of the messages we sent that they care a lot. Folks are able to move passive fan to interested. That's actually pretty common. Certainly that happened with the Earth elevator. That also happened with the Lunar elevator. It is beginning to happen with the Foundation for the Future. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that, the 30-ish, 20-ish people that are watching this particular session and the many hundreds beyond that we're live streaming to, I would say they're passive, but some of them are going to become interested. Some of those will become committed and supportive and eventually become an ambassador and commit and act, right? In the chat earlier, David's like, hey, can we start a letter writing campaign? Now, that was cool. That was entirely unsolicited. Shout out to you, David. I don't know you. That was really a neat idea. I'm glad that you were interested. So I'm gonna make the leap, and I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn here. If I'm wrong, please let me know. But I'm gonna make the leap that you start out in the curious capacity. As you learned more from yesterday and today, you became interested, and then you heard something that somebody, I think it maybe was Representative Banky, that made you say, "Hey, what if we did this as what if we had an organized letter writing campaign?" Like that. That's literally how this evolves on a minute-by-minute basis sometimes. So as soon as you posted that, I responded back, sure, get in touch with Tim because he does have a team that's trying to work on that. And that's you moving into kind of a committed, publicly involved. So currently I would put you in the publicly involved because you wrote that comment. But then if you follow through, no pressure, no pressure. But if you follow through, then you will have committed an overt act, and that puts you at the ambassador category. So again, that's moving. That's real time movement of stakeholders from one category to another.
Yeah, I think there's some research on that if you can convert a skeptic, someone who's an active skeptic, and you're successfully able to convert them into a committed supporter, you can gain even more loyalty there over the long term.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen that. I have never converted somebody from active anger. Active anger is a new category for me that I created after the Kickstarter. I had never seen that like directed at me before, but I have moved a lot of people from skeptic to there's one, I'm not going to name him because I think he wouldn't like it, but I moved one guy from skeptic to staff. Like he moved from skeptic to officially a part of my team. I used to refer to him as the resident curmudgeon because he would describe himself as a 51% committed to the elevator. Only 51. And so he would always come up with all the reasons why something wasn't going to work. And he had a super active role in our team. He eventually led some of our research, and his skepticism was really helpful. Like it turned into a very strong advantage for us. But he moved from skeptic to staff. Like that's how far he moved. That only happened one time, but it was a great example of how people can move. And once they decide that they are committed, they commit in a really powerful way. And this is true not just for building elevators. This is true for political campaigns. It is true for early adoption of advanced technology. I just mentioned a fintech client that I'm thinking of right now, but it's also been true of lots of different other technology adoptions. So yeah, skeptics are cool. I like it when people push back and ask questions. And if you can give them evidence that satisfies their skepticism, they move from skeptic through curious really fast into committed. So it's really fun to see that. It's powerful when it happens. I'm a fan of this guy, Gaping Void. His name is Hugh McLeod. He draws a lot of really interesting I won't say, like, it's almost demeaning to say it's motivational art, but he has a really good handle on systems and organizations. He's got some pretty interesting stuff. So if you want to take a look at Gaping Void, this is not a paid endorsement. This is me being a fan of his work. I brought it up on purpose. But this is powerful. The network is more powerful than the node. And when I saw this the first time, it's years old now, I just kind of had to marvel at it, right? And what I added to this is this blob herd horde mob node network. And there's actually another level, network of networks. It's not on the screen. If you're in like in the olden days last year in a cafe working, you're just a blob. You're just a blob doing your thing. There's no coordination. But if you go to the same cafe over and over again and you see other folks that are at the same cafe over and over again, you join the kind of a quasi cafe community and you're at the herd level. if you decide that you're going to meet on a regular basis and that maybe working together is useful, you kind of move into that horde category. A horde is distinguished from a mob by leadership or not leadership. Hordes do not have leaders. Zombie hordes do not have leadership, but mobs are all going in roughly the same direction, and they have a leader. So the person who gets everybody's name and phone number and email address and say, hey, you know, we're all working at the same cafe. Why don't we call ourselves the Cafe Club and meet up next Thursday? I'll send out an invite. Now you have leadership, right? Now, if that happened at a lot of cafes in a lot of places, each cafe is its own node, and that leads to networks. Right? Does that see how that kind of flows where individuals become communities? We've done that at Blue Marble Week. Blue Marble Week started as a what if conversation between Tim and I. He was asking, you know, how could he support our work on the elevator? And I flipped it around. It's like, you know, let's do something that's good for the elevator, but also good for the foundation. And what strategy and tactics are you using? Outreach is one of his keys. Okay, how do we do outreach? And that's the Blue Marble Week came together in 3 weeks. We had our first conversations in August where we're having, you know, big idea conversations about the elevator. And that, you know, we hosted an event in September that was completely not related to this. He liked what we did there. And by, you know, end of October, early November, we'd basically come up with an agreement to launch the thing on December 7th, which is the anniversary of the Blue Marble photo taken, right? And so we moved with a lot of speed through a lot of different layers to creating the Blue Marble Week that we have now. And that was individuals coming together as communities. I have a team, but I also have a lot of relationships. He has a team. He also has a lot of relationships. We moved very quickly through these levels to create networks of networks. And, you know, when we brought on the National Space Society, the new president of the National Space Society earlier this morning with Michelle, like, she represents a network. And on the call earlier, Cal Poly, and they were attending. They didn't speak this time. They spoke last time. You know, they're a network of networks, and we're in the Space Force Association and International Space Elevator Consortium. All of those are networks of networks, but they are run by individuals, right? And so if we tie enough networks together, the Foundation for the Future has a chance at succeeding at their big vision, mission, values, right? See how all those parts pull together? Does that make sense? Okay. So I've spent a lot of time over the last few years working here. This is actually an area I've spent a lot of effort at. Finally, one of the last ways to look at, well, there's two last ways of looking at stakeholders, is how they are organized. This is not very important, but it sometimes is important, right? Does it matter if it's an individual, this unorganized? Unorganized means, in this case, an individual or a representative for these networks. Is it a government? Is it a nonprofit, or is it a corporation? Sometimes that matters. It does not matter a lot, but sometimes it does. So I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail there. I want to spend a little bit more time back to this. You've already seen this. Again, I said this isn't a typo. I want you to look at the same thing with a different set of eyes with a different context. The first time you saw this, it was in relation to the policies that exist and your role within coloring within the lines. Now I want you to look at this from the perspective of can you change these rules? And representatives at each of these levels can be stakeholders in your success or failure. Okay. So the folks that that monitor, that enforce these policies, they are stakeholders. Okay. All right. That was a lot of stuff on stakeholders. How we doing? Any reactions? Any comments? Janet, weird that they got mad at getting an invitation. True. Some of them did. My history with some of those Kickstarter folks is, let's say, rocky. Some of them are great. Truly, 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 most of them are great. Some of them are bad relationships. The people are not bad. The relationship is not a great relationship. So some people were surprised. I hadn't communicated with a lot of these folks for a long time. And so the first message that they got from us is, hey, we're holding this event. Do you want to come? Look, I will talk more about Kickstarter tomorrow as when I talk about past, present, and future, but that's not the thing I want to focus on today. As for, sorry, Nelson, I don't understand your question. What about me? Do you want to elaborate on that?
It looks like from a follow-up comment as though you may have answered that question along.
Okay. Okay. Oh yeah, right. Nelson is working on a, I think the word he uses is a hybrid space elevator version. I'm sure you also have stakeholders. I know for a fact, I'm not going to go into what I know about you and your history, but you definitely have stakeholders, and some of them are good and some of them are bad. Definitely, I don't think of us as competitors. Maybe that's what your questioning is. I think maybe you're asking about, is the space elevator and the space shaft a competitor? I absolutely do not think so. I have a lot of respect for the work that you've done.
I think what you've done to tie in the stakeholder discussion to how you build networks and the power of those networks, and tying in some of the specific talks and speakers that we've had at Blue Marble Week over the last few weeks, and how that ties into Foundation for the Future, building those networks in order to succeed at passing the Space Act is very powerful.
Cool. Thank you. That's what I was hoping to get at this. I want, and I'm not saying that I'm like this guru know-it-all about this is how to do it. This is how I do it that has been effective for me. And everybody's going to have their own actions and reactions to this tool set. And I'm happy to share this stuff. When I talked to Tim about should we do this at all, I said in the beginning that this is an experiment. Like I didn't know how this thing was going to work out, but I'm happy to share this stuff. I want the foundation to succeed. I want the folks watching to succeed. This is not some secret proprietary tool. I've worked very hard on this tool, but in no way do I think that it should be like some secret weapon that's held, in a bunker somewhere. So happy to do it. My hope is that it's a tool that helps people succeed in whatever they're trying to do.